Good afternoon and welcome to the session on climate revolution, opportunities for green transitions in the Mediterranean. My name is Aleksandra Chmielewska and this is my pleasure to be the moderator of this session. In today's session, we'll discuss what may become a game changer in the Mediterranean region, that is climate change. How do we address it? What are the perspectives and ambitions of the EU and its southern neighbor partners? What actions are needed to promote effective green transitions, and what can be the main bottlenecks? To address those issues, we have brought together a stellar group of panelists. Let me present them to you very, very briefly before we kick off. Mr. Lukas Keller, member of German Bundestag and FDP spokesperson on climate policies. Hi, Lukas, thank you for being with us. Mrs. Aziza Monir. Aziza, thank you for joining us as well. You are Egyptian environmental politics researcher and visiting assistant professor at University of New Hampshire. And with me in the studio, Mr. Iskander Ben Mustafa. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Director of Advisory Services at Deloitte.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Lukas, let me kick off directly with you. In the joint communication of the European Commission, the new agenda for the Mediterranean, green transition features as one of the priorities that will structure and guide the relations between the EU and its southern neighbor partners. What, if you could briefly explain us, what are the priority measures for the cooperation and what, from the EU perspective, may be the key challenges in their implementation?
So first of all, for the EU, climate change is both a risk as well, or seen as a risk as well as a huge opportunity, or a big number of chances. So for us, and that is not only true for Europe, but that's all true for the whole world, for at least for the European perspective. As we see today, climate change will endanger lives, will endanger human rights, will endanger water security, scarcity of food, and all this. But it also is, on the same side, a very big chance for us, as the world will grow sort of hungry for renewable energy. And renewable energy doesn't come only in the form of wind or turbines or solar power and direct electricity, but it will also come in the form of, for example, hydrogen and hydrogen mixed with CO2, then produced to, for example, sustainable fuels, sustainable aviation fuels. So there is a huge need worldwide for new ideas in the energy sector, and specifically the MENA region has one of the biggest assets that we will see necessary for the next decades. So in order to prevent climate change from happening, we have to be CO2 neutral, and therefore we need huge amounts of very cheap energy. And that is the way forward, and that is the way that we see already emerging quickly in a lot of very sun-rich states. We have to tackle the obstacles, of course. We have seen what happened with desert tech, and we shouldn't allow it from this perspective to happen again. So for the EU, three things are majorly important. So it's a security in production as well as in the produced amount of renewable energies. It's the price, and the EU has to work together with countries, with other countries in order to transfer knowledge in the technologies and also in the systems. And the third thing that we will have to tackle is sort of trade systems. So we have to think new about trading and how it will be possible for us to implement what we can achieve together to tackle climate change, both on the COP upcoming in Glasgow, but also on direct or binational trade.
We discussed the EU a little bit, but let us zoom into the region. Iskander, many countries in the region are facing huge socioeconomic challenges, which were further exacerbated by the pandemic. So, from your point of view, how is the EU Green Deal and this idea of green transition perceived by the states in the region? And also briefly, if you could tell us what has been the state of the transitions, green transitions, so far.
Look, if we talk about transition, it is taking too much time. We are still in transition since 10 years, okay? I remember back in 2010, we were already talking about reducing the carbon footprint to decrease by a huge amount on the horizon of 2030. Now we are talking about 2050. So really this transition is slowing down. I can see, I'm in the industry since more than 15 years. I can see how on the government level, not only in North Africa, but in the relationships between North Africa and Europe, how this process is slowing down. There are a lot of very interesting discussions, very interesting understanding and willing to go through this transition, but on the field we can't see anything happening. And this is due to several problems. The first one is a legal framework problem. This is a big issue that has to be overcome, not only at the southern part of the Mediterranean, but also in Europe. Okay, how to articulate this transition on a legal framework that will be adapted to both realities. Okay, then we come to also the development of new projects. And there you have very different situations. We can see how in Morocco, the transition is faster than in other countries. If you compare it to Tunisia, to Libya, to Algeria, you don't have, like you have in Europe, a unified voice or a unified willing to go through a current process, okay? So I think that everybody wants and knows, everybody knows what are the challenges. They all know what is the path for a better sustainable development and how to face climate change and increase renewables into the energy mix. But on the field, we can see articulation of a legal framework and policy making that will facilitate this transition. So if we talk about transition, we are still in the beginning of the transition. And the rules of this transition is not yet a reality.
Thank you, Iskander. Aziza, if I can turn to you. You're based in Egypt, right? So if you would like to add something to what Iskander mentioned, what are, according to you, from your point of view, living in Egypt, the challenges faced by the states that prevent them from implementing those green transitions?
Thank you, Alexandra. First of all, I would like to take the chance to thank Friedrich Naumann Foundation for providing this opportunity that may facilitate the interaction between science and policy making in a way that may tease out conflicting or hopefully shared understanding of green transition in the region. Talking about the challenges in the region, actually the challenges in the region are multifaceted, particularly given the increasing rate of population growth. For example, like a century ago, the number of population were in the MENA region was like 50 million. However, in 2018, the number of the population increased to 580 million person. During this time, like the excessive extraction and manufacturing of natural resources led to the environmental deterioration in the region due to like unsustainable development paths. In my answer, I would like to focus on two main environmental problems that need like increased attention. First one, the water scarcity in the region and the climate change. The MENA region could be described as like one of the most water-stressed region in the world, even 6 times more so than the global average. Many of its aquifers are at high risk of becoming depleted. The problem is even worse given the increasing rate of population growth policies that subsidize the cost of water rather than encouraging efficient use and a warming and drying climate. Furthermore, 60% of the region's water originates outside the region, and most countries share aquifers and surface water with their neighbors. Yet, unfortunately, there are very few transboundary agreements on the use and management of shared water resources. This institutional weakness cripples efforts at agreeing on the sustainable use and management of shared natural water resources. Actually, decades of negotiation on the Euphrates and Tigris have not led to an agreement between Turkey, for example, and downstream Iraq and Syria. Israel still controls the availability of water resources in Palestine. And this kind of lack of efficient political institutions and legal framework led to increasing chances of rising conflicts and tensions, which will further hinder the MENA governments and other multilateral institutions to create kind of sustainable use of the, create agreements that organize the use of shared water resources. The second important environmental issue that I would like to pay attention to is the climate change. Climate change is like a threat multiplier in the region. And actually, there are many manifestations of the climate change, increasing sea level rise, waves of heat, and scarce rainfalls in the regions. All these are manifestations of the climate change, and how climate change is not such an environmental problem. However, it has political and social implication, leading to increasing environmental migration, for example, from the MENA region to the EU and so on. Therefore, also another important thing is that oil exporting countries in the MENA region are facing significant obstacles to reform their economies so that they can be prepared to embrace a smooth green transition. In fact, countries that have some kind of success in dealing with climate change as an environmental challenge have made it as a political priority that guides transformational and integrated decision-making across government departments. The policy shift also was encouraged by active civil society in a space of open and transparent dialogue between the government and the civil society in Tunisia. These factors are unfortunately lacking in other MENA region countries, where there is a more restricted environment for the work of the civil society in order to interact with the government and address environmental concerns. And these initiatives, as I said, unfortunately, are not prevailing in the MENA region, with the exception of few non-oil exporting countries. One example is Tunisia. In particular, Tunisia inscripted addressing climate change in its constitution in the Article 54, and also Morocco and Jordan, although they have less open environment for the work of the civil society. However, they have more powerful climate change policies and water management policies. So all in all, across the region, authorities view those that question the official development course from an environmental perspective as a threat to the state. And unfortunately, as my colleague Alexander mentioned, we lack legal framework and institutional arrangements that mainstream climate change adaptation and efficient use of water resources in the former policies of the states in the MENA region.
Aziza, so many challenges and obstacles at political level, institutional level, legal level. Of course, we would need to have a few days conference to discuss them more in depth, but unfortunately this is not possible today. You've tackled a little bit, and you've mentioned civil society, so I would like to also zoom into this level. Climate change seems not to be perceived as a problem by the citizens in the region. In the 2019 edition of the Euromed survey, which is published by the European Institute of the Mediterranean, when answering the question what should be the main focus of the civil society in the southern and eastern Mediterranean countries, only 7% of respondents from the South said climate change. You've been analyzing environmental activism in your research for many years. If you could tell us how has it evolved over the recent years and how we could possibly increase the awareness of the citizens about the climate change.
Actually, this is one of my favorite topics because it's closely related to my area of expertise, which is environmental politics and environmental movements in the wake of the Arab Spring. So give me a little bit time. In order to talk and tackle environmental activism, we need to differentiate between two different periods of time before the Arab Spring and after the Arab Spring or post-Arab Spring. Before the Arab Spring, the Middle East used to face a number of important environmental issues. However, only some have become salient in the public sphere, and particularly environmental mobilization revolved around issues that directly related to daily livelihood, such as pollution, like having industries proximate to communities, waste management and waste disposal, lack of green space and recreation opportunities, and as I mentioned, industrial pollution. However, state elites and official media outlets often viewed such kind of mobilization or environmental contestation in both rural and urban areas in the region with suspicion. Critical voices concerned about health and environmental issues received short recognition across the MENA region, not in a specific country. And usually there was kind of official ambivalence about environmental claim that was manifested in calls by state-owned media and government officials to respect the unity and integrity of the state, often portraying environmental activists or local demands for environmental justice as acts of internal division triggered by outside agitator. While some of on the other hand, there was some kind of improvement, and usually the governments in the region managed to promote their economic activities as has some kind of sustainable aspect. However, in fact, this was some kind of greenwashing, and there was no sustainable practices on the ground that advocate for the environmental rights of the lay citizens and try to strike a balance between economic development and environmental sustainability. Therefore, the environmental activism, we witnessed few examples of environmental campaigns in the region before the Arab Spring. However, the post-Arab Spring, usually in my articles and in my work, I claim that the Arab Spring also is a green spring in the sense that it brought to the forefront of the public sphere environmental issues, and people and young activists became more and more concerned with their environmental rights and the environmental justice and their right in healthy, clean environment. There are plenty of examples of environmental campaigns that took place in the region in the wake of the Arab Spring. For example, in Egypt, we have the Youth Tank movement. In Egypt, we have the anti-coal, the Egyptian against coal campaign. And this campaign happened in the wake of the Egyptian government decision to re-import or reintroduce coal as an energy source in Egypt. The campaign also wanted to...
If I could interrupt you, because we unfortunately the session is very, very short and we still need to tackle a lot of important issues. I really see that you can talk about environmental activism, and this is such an interesting topic. But there is hope, right? So this, at least with this, it's important. But let's quickly turn to finance, because this is yet another important issue. Of course, the green transitions will require adaptation and modernization of several sectors: agriculture, industry, transport. So, Lucas, a quick question to you. How does the EU plan to mobilize investments for such an ambitious vision?
Okay, I do believe there's three major important ways of mobilization capital for mobilizing capital for green transition also in the MENA region. First of all, one is one aspect will always be, and of course is still a very important part of financing climate change damages. So something like the Green Climate Fund, which is established under the Paris Agreement, is of course a mobilization factor for money in order to tackle problems coming with climate change. Of course, it's an important factor, and I would put sort of all the money that is being spent on projects in this regard under the umbrella of directly financing projects in the region. And the second part is, I think, majorly important as well. The second part will be cooperations that we establish binationally and also with the European Union and several countries that are being worked on under the Paris Agreement. It's Article 6 of the Paris Agreement that allows countries to mobilize money to increase their own ambition in order to finance projects. We have to see how the rule book behind this will be structured and if it works out in Glasgow. But as was mentioned before, it's completely correct. We need a good legal frameworks on this. And then the third part, I think, is the part where chances and possibilities come together. As I've said before, we have we are already seeing with all the transformation agendas in Europe, we are already seeing that we will have an immense necessity for importing several aspects of energy, clean energy. And we can also see that we have countries also in the MENA region who are investing, if you look at some oil exporting countries, they're already investing money into hydrogen projects, as well as Morocco, although we already see a problem with Morocco as energy is being used as a political leverage, if you look at the West Sahara conflict and the hydrogen projects that are emerging with this. But this is the third part, I think, is one of the very interesting aspects of mobilizing capital, because it's not only state funded, but it will of course be corporation funded, not business funded models. And we have something in Europe that is called the Sustainable Finance Agreement. So we are working on different aspects of how the financial sector, the financial industry, can be modified or changed or directed towards more green and more sustainable investments. And that is also true for the international level, as there are some dialogues on this, as well as this new mobilization for private investments that will be labeled green. But you have to stress on this. I do believe you have to stress on the specific frameworks we will need in order to label something as green energy. Because what was mentioned just before, if a country produces hydrogen with coal, that's not the case, it's not the plan. But if that would happen, that of course would not tackle climate change, but would just, maybe remove emissions from Europe to other countries, and that can't be the way to go, the way forward. So we have to invest in huge projects with a lot of money, and a lot of this money will come from the European parliaments, from the European Parliament, of course, but also from the countries, as well as the private sector.
Thank you, Lucas. And this investment in huge projects was also one of the findings of the survey. I would love to ask you more questions, but this is the time for questions from the public.
It is. Thank you very much,
first of all.
Thank you very much to all the speakers, and thank you we've got a few questions, actually, Alexandra. The first one is from Jaime, and he's asking, why not to establish solutions before raising taxes on diesel, emissions, airplanes, etc.?
Who would like to answer that?
This is a tricky one, right?
I can if you want to.
Go
Please,
ahead.
Lucas, go ahead.
Policymakers can answer that.
Yeah. So we've started establishing CO2 pricing in Europe, right? So we have the emissions trading system that is also already, and that is going up quite a bit. It's went up to 55 euros per ton of CO2. And you already see, and we have in Germany, we have a new sort of CO2 taxation. Of course, those CO2 prices are sort of an economical tool, a policy tool to reward non-CO2 based products, solutions, energy, whatever, you name it. And that it's a good idea, but it can't come alone. And it has always been, the question of that will always be, how do we sort of give the money back? And do we give it back to companies? Do we give it back into investment? Which is a good idea because the state generates money, right? So we have to give those money back, but we also have to, and I think that is very important for policymakers at the moment. We have to see the scale of the necessity to tackle climate change. We are not changing small policies on small parts. We are changing the whole economy of the whole world, which is just, it's a huge project. And you can't say, let's do just one thing and not do the other thing. I do think we have to do a lot of pluses. We have to do both CO2 pricing as well as huge investments into new ideas, new products, new infrastructure, new ways of cooperation between countries, and of course, new legal structures, new institutions.
Thank you. Aziza, briefly, because we're running out of time.
I will try my best.
Thank you.
Answering the same question?
Yeah, well, if you want, we've got other questions. I mean, for example, Karina Marcanio is asking, do you think EU financial assistance for climate change adaptation should be based on conditionality approach?
I guess...
Choose the question you want.
No, it's okay. I can give my input, and of course, Lucas can give more detailed and insightful insight about this, given that the fact he's come from the policy making circle. In my opinion, the EU is the world's largest contributor of climate finance to developing countries and increasingly integrate climate change into its broader development strategy. There are very numerous and ambitious initiatives such as the European Environment Agency and the EU Emission Trading Scheme, which representing a very important pillar of European policy to combat climate change and reduce greenhouse gas emission in an economically efficient way. And also we have the European Green Deal, which is a package of measures that aims to make Europe the first carbon neutral continent in the world by 2050. All these are very ambitious initiatives that try to phase out CO2. And as I mentioned, the EU emission trading scheme is very important economic tool in order to price CO2 emissions and encourage involved countries to go forward with their pursuit to phase out CO2 emissions. Also, a very important initiative recently was the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, which is a clear example of support the EU provides to cities, regions, business, and civil society organizations committing to battle or combat climate change across the world. All these very ambitious initiatives, and the EU has done great work in this regard.
Thank you very much, Aziza. Iskander, do you want to answer any of them? I'm leaving you, by the way, to close the debate too, because now we are going to comment your debate actually with the influencers.
No, I think that the challenge is the same for everyone. I mean, in Northern Africa, of course, there is a lack of finance access to get into this transition. But at the same time, it's not only about money, it's about know-how, how to put together a framework that would be attractive for private investors to come to this region of the world and invest in sustainable energy in that region. You have also opportunities, for example, here in Spain, for Spanish companies that have an incredible know-how in putting together this kind of projects and go there and assess the governments, the national agencies, and the legal maker to put together a legal framework that will be attractive for this kind of business. Because I was in that business since 15 years, and the problem is when you are there and you want to invest and put together a power plant, a wind farm or something like this, you spend more time knowing with whom you have to talk, what is the authorization that you need to have, what is the tariff that will put together your cash flow and be bankable, and you can find banks and financial institutions to get with you on that project, than to put the technical project on the field. So for small businesses, maybe they can go through this path, but for big companies like Enel, like Siemens, like the big ones, they will go and see in other countries, in other parts of the world, where the legal framework is attractive. So there is not only a problem of money. If you have an attractive region for private investment in renewables, you will have money. But you have to have a good business offer and business model to attract and to develop that industry. It's the same thing for any kind of business. If you have a good business model, you will have money. Money is there. The good businesses are not always in the right place.
Thank you, Iskander. So definitely many challenges. We would need an integrated approach and mindset change, huge efforts of state and societies. But let me finish with a positive note, this session, that if we leverage correctly all the policies, the adaptation and the adaptation to climate change may profoundly transform the region in a positive way. So on that note, I would like to thank all the panelists for their interventions and for respecting the time allocated. And from me, Alexandra, thank you very much.